Good morning, friends. How are you today? Good. Yeah, you're all here. This reading today is from Mark chapter 13, verses 24 to 37, and I'm reading from the New International Version. Now, this piece comes toward the end of the ministry. Jesus has worked his way to Jerusalem, and he's just given his great sermon in the courtyard of the temple with constant harassment by the scholars. How dare he be there? And so the Bible says he came out and sat down on the Mount of Olives facing the temple, and he started to try to warn his followers about the horrible things that were coming, the destruction of the temple, wars and rumors of wars, false prophets, and the persecution they would meet. And then he turns to them and he says, "But in those dark days following that distress, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds and from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as the twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge and with their assigned tasks and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch because you do not know when the owner of the house will come, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. May these words sustain us in the coming times. Amen.
Well, I'm really glad to have Bruce Sanguin with us. Bruce and I have known each other for a long time. And then when we were face to face, we realized we had so much in common and have shared conversation through email and phone call. And Bruce was with us a couple of years ago to share some of his thought. Bruce is from Winnipeg and ministered where?
Both Toronto and then last time in Vancouver.
Toronto and Vancouver. Now he's a psychotherapist and an author and speaker. And he's been working with us this last couple of days. On Friday night, we had about 55 people came to think about what's evolutionary theology. And then yesterday, a workshop, about 35 more people showed up to engage. How does this work and what does it mean for our life and our faith? And then he's with us for this sermon conversation to share something about it. There are different kinds of theology. So there's a feminist theology as an example. Feminist theology would say, how do we look at the Bible as a woman? A feminine voice. What's the feminist voice that the scriptures speak to us? Or in Central American, the liberation theology that emerged in the 80s was how does the Bible speak to those who are poor and those who are in power? And liberation theology picks up the theology of our Bible that speaks about liberation. Or there might be some who would say, I'm a creation theologian. That is someone who looks at nature and the gift of creation and the theology that comes through creation. So Bruce has been here with some of us having a conversation about evolutionary theology. So my sort of first question is, what's that?
Okay.
Briefly.
Yeah, it's great to be here. This is a fabulous church. You already know that, but you're rare in Canada, so it's a great honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Evolutionary theology. Most of us in high school were taught, or in university, that evolution is kind of an accidental, meaningless process going nowhere fast, and it just so that the result is that you and I are basically accidents here this morning. Happy accidents, maybe, I don't know. But what I want to present is the possibility that that's not the only way of looking at what evolution is. It's possible that Spirit infuses this evolutionary process, is at the very heart and at the end, maybe, of the evolutionary process, rendering it a sacred unfolding rather than a meaningless accidental process. And that sacred unfolding has eventuated in you and me sitting here this morning. So we are fruits of that evolutionary tree, with the remarkable thing occurring in us that we are those parts of creation capable of consciously evolving. So evolution isn't just happening passively. Through you and me, when we align with this evolutionary spirit-filled impulse of this cosmic unfolding, we gain the capacity to consciously evolve so that together we can join in helping the world that our hearts know is possible to emerge and be realized. So you and I here are the presence of that whole evolutionary unfolding in human form with the capacity to consciously choose our future. It's incredible what we represent. So that's evolutionary theology. And it's kind of the world view and what comes, what does that mean for how we do church and, how we do worship and
So evolution isn't this theory that's static. We're actually part of it. We're in it.
Yeah.
That moves it from out there to right here.
Right. The way I like to talk about that is we are that part of evolution that presences the whole process. We are that concentrated amalgams, each one of us, of 14 billion years of complexification of this impulse to eventuate an increase of beauty, truth, and goodness in and through you guys. It's amazing.
We got a big job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the scripture that Lucretia read was great, and it's kind of a freaky one when you think about it. Oh my gosh, look at the stars, the moon, what's going on. Apocalyptic, we call it. Apocalypse now. And it's also eschatological, looking at the end times. What do you make of that when all of those images of the stars and the moon and all of creation speaking to us? What do you make of that?
Well, from an evolutionary point of view, it's really interesting because in this text, there is cosmological or sort of universal participation, the sun, the moon, and the stars, participating in a crisis, in a judgment of how we've been orienting as a species on the planet Earth. So apocalypse doesn't mean the literal end of the world. In Greek, it means a revealing, a disclosure of the way things are that can only be disclosed in and through the presence of crisis, because without crisis, mostly we just remain asleep. We just sort of snooze through life and everything's, But so what Jesus is saying is it's time to awaken by virtue of the crisis that is facing us. We could say today, both on a planetary global level and in our individual lives. But in such a way, in this remarkable way, this is not a doomsday prophecy by any means, despite what you might hear on TV from some evangelists. It doesn't signal the end of the world. There are different kinds of apocalypse, in fact. John Crossan, who's a New Testament scholar, talks about, it's a big word, sapiential, it's got that sapiens, homo sapiens, which means wisdom. So it means an apocalypse that comes about through the overturning that happens with sacred wisdom, how our worlds are turned inside out. And Jesus was one of those who was a carrier of sacred wisdom. So to be in his presence and still today to hear his words is to undergo an apocalypse, a revealing of the way things actually are. That doesn't mean, as I said, it's all going to come to an end, because he has this incredible metaphor. He says, look at the leaves on a tree. When you see them coming, you know that summer is near. And so the apocalypse is the anticipation, not of the absolute end of the world, maybe the end of our world as we've known it, sort of emotionally, psychologically. Rather, it's the budding forth of a new order of being. And this is what I think we're getting at in this first Sunday of Advent. This is what we're anticipating. This is what we're watching for. Stay alert. Is this budding forth of a new order. It's like, and it's my belief that what Jesus was talking about was the new order is precisely, and he will talk about this in various places, is the dawning of the age of the Son of Man. 99 times in the New Testament scriptures, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. And what it means is it means like the new human 2.0. It's like the new iteration of humanity. If you can respond to the personal crises that are meant to awaken you, and to our global crises that are meant to awaken us as a species. The human one, or the Son of Man, is a reference to Ezekiel's prophecy, where there's this kind of spinning orb, and on it is the throne of God, except sitting on that throne is not God, but an archetype of the new order of humanity, is the new human being. And Jesus is saying, Jesus was owning that. Jesus was saying, that's on me. I am a foretaste of the new human that's possible. So when he's talking about the budding of the leaf, and you got to stay awake, you got to be aware of this, what he's talking about, I think, is each one of us need to be awake for that new human that wants to bud and emerge in you and in me, to tap into this deep reservoir of potential that the human species hasn't yet tapped into. This evolutionary, spirit-filled impulse to bring forth a new self, but a new world. What the scriptures talk about is a new Jerusalem, a new possibility. Yeah.
So
somebody stop me.
Okay, I will. Okay, so the other thing that's happening at this time, right, is you talk about emerging. So when I think of Advent, I think it's a time of waiting and expectation. We all know it's coming, the birth. Does that mean that hey, Sean, you know that what's really important too is that we recognize that in Advent we're all pregnant. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, that's
why I got a bad back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I'll skip the doctor. No,
well,
really.
I like that because you know the Christmas story. Yeah. Okay. The Christmas story is all about celebrating the birth of that new human, the new order of being. And this morning I talked about a Nobel laureate chemist named Ilya Prigogine, who he won this Nobel Prize by pointing out that a system that is under stress, in crisis, will come to a bifurcation point where either the stress will be too great and it will break down into pure chaos, or the other possibility that stress will help the system or the person or the planet, what he called, escape to a new higher order of being. That's the evolutionary process. And so I want to say, yeah, so absolutely. We're pregnant in Advent, waiting for, we're going to celebrate the birth of Jesus, but really what we're waiting for are signs of that new order of being, that escape to the higher order taking place in you and me. That's what we're waiting on. That's what we're alert for. So we turn inward, we turn outward. Where's that happening? Where do we see it happening in the world? Aligning our energies and our creativity and our hearts with that new life that's coming. But it's not coming outside of us. It's coming in us.
So does that mean, somebody said to me afterwards, is this really inward looking? Well, I think I tried to say that doesn't the journey begin looking inside instead of looking out all the way time first? Or is it both? It's an inward
it's
journey,
both, you know.
Inward journey to ourselves, which
To,
is, you know,
to a realization, to an awakening that this isn't happening in someone else. I'm not waiting for this new order to happen out there. It's not a passive thing. It's like I'm called, I am responsible for that awakening in myself, to realize who I actually am. And sometimes, most often, it's the presence of crisis, the presence of the apocalypse in our own lives. But once we awaken to that, then we want to join with others to build that new world that our hearts know is possible. Right? So it's not just inward.
yeah.
It
But-
manifests out, you know.
Okay, so you just tweaked my memory to a Jewish rabbi, said, you know, we don't think the Messiah is this guy coming in on a white horse to save the world. He said the Messiah is us. Is that right?
Yeah.
In the sense that the potential to love, to live justice and peace is up to us to do.
Yeah,
So we're the
absolutely.
Messiah that way?
Yeah, we're the ones we've been waiting for.
Figure that out.
Right? And we talked about this yesterday,
Yeah.
that the Christian life really comes alive when we realize that we're actually everything that Jesus did is possible for us. In John's Gospel, he says, "Greater things than I have done will you folks do." Why is that true? That's true because the universe is actually evolving. So it didn't stop with Jesus. Jesus knew that.
Didn't start with him either.
And it didn't start with him, but it came through him. He was transparent to this evolutionary impulse. So that evolutionary impulse hasn't gone anywhere. It's alive, folks. It's in us. All we got to do is feel into it. When we feel into that evolutionary impulse, my belief is it's a direct experience of spirit, empowering us and enlivening us for the task that is ours, to be this new order of human.
So what about, you know, you mentioned this, you said crisis is a good thing. Well, you didn't quite say that, but I'll say that.
Yeah, for sure.
So how each of us have, individually, we all have crisis, everybody. Nobody avoids that, right? That's what the
Right.
cross is about, right?
Yeah,
We don't go around it. We all go through struggle, pain, sorrow, death,
yeah,
crisis. Crisis, you're saying here, is an opportunity.
right. And in fact, the Greek word for crisis, or I don't know, it's Chinese, right? Have you ever heard this? Like the markings, the Chinese alphabet, the word for it's crisis/opportunity. So there's two sides of the same coin. So crisis, no, it's not a bad thing. It's like birth pangs. I mean, I haven't undergone that kind of birth. A friend of mine is currently undergoing that, but I'm pretty sure it's experienced as a crisis. And, of course, an opportunity.
Opportunity, that's the process. So in the passage too, it says, you know, everything's going to pass away, but my words won't pass away. Like what's a line of scripture, second last question here, line of scripture or a phrase or a story that sticks with you?
Well, the one that comes to mind for this service, I had a different one last service, but I was thinking about it. Though I really like when Jesus, if someone, you know, came, he said, "Follow me," right? And so this guy says, "I would, but," you know, we all have our excuses. And this guy said, his was pretty good though. He said, "I would, but I got to bury my father," which was a sacred obligation in Jewish culture. Jesus looks at him, and it might seem harsh, but he said, let the dead bury the dead, you follow me. The reason I like this is that there is an undeniable future orientation coming through Jesus. It's not that he was saying there's anything wrong with the past, and yes, we need to be fully present, but he was saying, follow me into this new future that we're giving birth to. And that takes precedence over all else, this new order of humanity that we are birthing here together. And that became the church. You guys.
Okay, the last word in that text was watch.
Yeah.
You know, they're all the way through there. Pay attention, watch, be awake. Why do we have to do that?
Well, it's the unique gift of the human creature is that we have this capacity for conscious self-awareness. But more than that, with Jesus, there are certain people like Jesus and the Buddha and some of the Hindu masters who have shifted into, like Sri Aurobindo and Ramakrishna, and who have shifted into a stage of super consciousness where their consciousness never dulls. They're in a state of constant awake awakening. So they never fall asleep. They're in a constant state of awareness of what's happening with themselves, what's happening in the world. And as it relates to this text this morning, I would say the importance of that is like what the call is to, as we are in this season of Advent, awaiting, on the one hand, the birth of this new order of this new human. We're also paying attention to the signs within us that potential really does exist within us. Where do you see it? And where do we see it in others? Where is it happening in the world? And then once you see it, align yourselves with that. Be allured by the presence of all of that potential that's lying dormant in us. And, if that's a fire, like the first fire, the Big Bang, that fire is still alive in you and me, then fan those flames so that potential becomes alive. And, watch for it. Be aware of it. Align yourselves with it. Amplify it. That's where we're going.
So, as you talk that, so the image is kind of like we're pregnant and we got binoculars. Is that right?
He did it again. I mean, it's like, yeah, we're pregnant.
Why didn't you say that 20 minutes ago?
All right.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, is that right? Like where there's this expectation we give birth, but we're also got to have our eyes open. That's what the spiritual journey is about.
Yeah, I like your binocular image too. I'm just like, because the binoculars amplify how much we can see. And, it takes us away from this sort of, sometimes we're in crisis because the present is so pressed in on our faces, or our faces are pressed against it, that we can't see any other future. So you grab those binoculars you talked about, and there's a new future that opens up.
And that kind of links to hope. That's where hope lies. Right now, sometimes we're in the crisis we can't see.
Right.
And the hope is calling us forward to a new day, a new way.
Yeah. And hope is just a little more perspective taking on the crisis.
Nice. Thank you very much, Bruce. Bruce is going to be here with us for lunch, and he flies back later today, so you can, if you want to challenge him, question him, support him, whatever. We're really glad you're going to be here. I can't get over there, but I see some tea that is Bruce is going to bring it over. This is community, which is tea from Hillhurst United Church, Twisted Church. When you're back in Vancouver and it's cold and rainy and dingy and dark and gloomy and there's a crisis,
right.
The sunshine of Alberta will bring you hope.
Beautiful. Thanks, Prince. Thanks, John.
This